This is Derrick Broze with Activist Post and the Conscious Resistance Network, here with my good friend Jeffrey Tucker. We're at the Texas Libertarian Party State Convention in San Antonio, and I just wanted to talk with you a little bit about an interview you did recently. And
yeah, which one was that?
It was with Mike Shanklin.
Oh yeah, Mike. So that was a fascinating interview because it had been a long time since he had interviewed me.
Mm-hmm. You touched on social justice warriors, you touched on Trump, you touched on left libertarianism, and also you talked about some of your views, how they've evolved over time, or just being willing to reconsider certain things.
I mentioned a few things in particular that I've actually, it's hard to say I've changed my mind, but some things I've developed a more refined position on. One has been on intellectual property. That was a big change for me because that issue I hadn't thought about for a long time. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but you sometimes confront an issue and you just you're not sure what you think, so you decide not to think about it.
Yeah.
That was the way it was for me in intellectual property. So eventually I came around, I thought hard about it, and then I experienced this kind of mental revolution because it's a lot of implications to that whole issue of intellectual property. And it changed a lot of my views on things, about the value of ideas, their structure and their nature. So that was awesome. And it's really cool to learn something new.
Do you think libertarians sometimes, libertarian anarchists, everybody's sort of within this milieu of our movement, maybe have an aversion to, admitting, okay, maybe I'm ready to revisit my ideas, or my ideas evolve?
I think you make a good point there, and I think it's really unfortunate because, like Hayek teaches us that none of us can know everything, that we all have, knowledge is dispersed. The knowledge that makes the world work doesn't belong to any one of us, really, consciously, certainly not. We know about our time and place, and we know about the areas we specialize in, but that's exciting to not know something because it means that you have a potentially infinite number of intellectual adventures ahead of you in life. So I like that idea. To me, that's really exciting. To come to terms with your absence of knowledge is actually not scary. It's actually something that's exciting because it means you can always learn more. So another area that I guess I changed my mind on slightly was, it was the issue of immigration, which I remember getting a pushback on that because I was free immigration in college, but I got a pushback at young adulthood. And I decided not to think about it, for another 20 years. But then the more recent issues, with Trump's nativism and the way he was able to stand in front of an audience and just push people's buttons and make them believe we had some terrible immigration crisis, even though immigration is practically banned in this country. And that's a lot of the reason for the illegals. But he was able to manipulate people. And I thought, you know what? I need to, own this issue. Mm-hmm. So I really spent a lot of time researching it, and it was exciting. And I realized that free immigration, or free migration, or free association is an essential principle of liberalism. And I'm not sure I had understood that before. So that was exciting for me.
So there's been a number of libertarians who are revisiting immigration, and some are saying, well, Rothbard had this position, or Hoppe had this position.
Let me just say something about Murray's position on free immigration. First of all, he was a dedicated free immigrationist for 40 years of his career, and that's documented everywhere. He writes about it in For New Liberty, he writes about it in Libertarian Forum. Sometimes he would excommunicate his friends from libertarianism for pulling back slightly, on the free migration position. And so Murray was dedicated to free immigration. There's only one place or two maybe in the last couple of years of his life where he stepped into it slightly in ways that I think are really regrettable and pulled back from his free migration position. And I was with him at the time. In fact, I published that paper in which he did that. And it's funny that at the time I published it, I was unaware of the significance of it. But now I look back and I think, wow, to have changed your mind on such a fundamental issue as that. Something tells me, though, that if Murray were around, of course you can't know, right? Mm-hmm. But if you could see the way demagogues like Trump are allying with white supremacists, nationalists, the alt-right, the neo-reactionaries, and even dangerous elements of right-wing statism, authoritarianism, in the name of anti-immigration, he might have changed again. I don't know. I think he might have reverted to his And Murray was, after all, a libertarian. And there's something very weird about libertarians being allied with just open authoritarians and nationalists and really white supremacists.
I feel like, in my analysis of seeing the rise of Trump, really watching since you put up the Newsweek article, that everybody went on Newsweek, feature on Newsweek, calling Trump a fascist and kind of seeing the policies that were coming, and now he's really lived up to that.
Yeah, yes. Well, it's funny, Derek, because I had seen this, when I was at Freedom Fest and last June, because he was speaking.
He spoke in Vegas.
Yeah. And as he began talking, I just, the books we read affect us. And I love this book from 1944, Omnipotent Government by Mises. It's a big attack on the Nazis, But he lays out Nazi cultural theory, economic theory, political propaganda, and he does it very systematically on the first page all the way up to the end. And I love the book, but I wasn't around then, so everything I kind of know about that, I learned from that book. So I'm standing there in front of Trump, and suddenly it was like Trump had used this book as a template, And it was like so obvious to me what he was doing. He was taking a kind of a syndicalist-style socialism and stripping out its politically unpopular elements and injecting a kind of a right-wing cultural, social, fascist, even racialist. Not even. I mean, that is a racialist agenda, and the way he was, and mercantilism, and able to kind of really trick a very large audience of otherwise sophisticated lovers of freedom into going along with him. And I thought, my God, this guy is the brown shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, he may not personally be. I don't know, but
the ideas that he's at least espousing publicly are going that direction.
He's calling on that thing that's always out there, and formulating it in a way that
silent majority.
Yeah, silent majority, right? Except it's only a tiny number, it turns out. But what's interesting about that is that I think that libertarians are unaware of this tradition. I mean, we're always scared of the Reds. We know what socialism looks like. When we heard Bernie talk, we're kind of like, that's stupid. Yeah. We're very quick to understand what his tradition and what's wrong with it. But we're less educated about the danger from the right, the brown shirts. Like, we're afraid of the Reds, but the Browns, we don't even, it's like we've lost consciousness of who they are and why they exist and what that looks like. So as a result, Trump has sort of tricked a lot of libertarians. I mean, either trick them into actual support, which is tragic, but I think intellectually there's a problem because people keep being surprised by the things that Trump's saying.
Yeah.
They think he's just saying a series of random nonsense. That's not true.
Yeah.
I mean, he's drawing from a deep and very successful political tradition of the 20th century.
And I feel like what's another interesting aspect of it, sort of ironic, is that he's playing on the policy, like, for instance, the state and everything that they've done in the Middle East to create and foment what has become ISIS, which has created this sort of Islamophobia, and then Trump gets to come on and seize on that moment. When again, the problems can be traced back to the state as well.
Yeah, and he never says that, right? I mean, he's very anxious to create scapegoats for people.
Absolutely.
And it's very strange. It's like everybody wants to talk about everything except the real problem, which is the state. So of course, the Bernie Sanders groups, and they want to blame Wall Street and wealth. And now we've got the right wing with Trump, wanting to blame basically heterogeneous populations, non-Christian populations, or social deviants, non-whites.
Yeah,
or
they're pretty clear about the non-white, thing.
Oh yeah, sure. And misogyny always plays into this.
Yeah,
I mean, because in fascist theory, what's the purpose of women? I mean, the purpose of women is to breed the race.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Keep the race pure.
Keep the race pure, which means they have to be controlled. So women running wild on the loose, making their own choices is a serious problem for the fascist agenda. So women are very much they are to be nationalized.
Yeah.
Their wombs are to belong to the nation. So misogyny is inevitably a part of the brown-shirted fascistic ideology.
I think it's also interesting, just to kind of comment on Trump, then I'll ask you one more question, is to see, you said we recognize the threat from the left as far as socialism, this and that, but I feel like maybe one of the reasons libertarian-minded people have been less, aware of the threat from the right is because since the 60s, once...
We've been allied with them.
Exactly, and I think, I honestly, personally, I look back to Rothbard's time, working with the New Left and the Left and Right Journal and Carl Hess, and to me, I feel like there was so much potential.
I know, and Murray saw this. very early on. I mean, after the beginning of the Cold War, he was like, "Why is our cause always bound up with the right? That's a problem. We are not reactionaries."
And he went back to the paleos, though. Like, so
but I mean, so many years later.
Yeah.
But he was like, he had this awesome insight. He was like, "We are not reactionaries. We are actually progressives. We oppose the right because the right has always been the party of hierarchy, stasis, of the aristocracy, and really of the state." And he said, we're the opposite of that. So he set out really to sever the idea of libertarianism from its association with right-wing ideology. And I guess it didn't entirely succeed, but it's worth it to go back and read.
Yeah.
So, the best book on this topic is Left, Right, and the Prospects for Liberty. It's just, I don't know how long it's been since you read it, but it's an awesome read. I mean, it's really inspiring. So here's the problem. Lots of people would hear me say that and they go, "Oh, so Tucker, you're saying we should be allied with the left?" No. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying we should hold out a principled position in favor of human liberty.
Recognize ourselves as an independent force that shouldn't align with the left and shouldn't align with the right.
And rather should align with the interests of the whole of humanity. I mean, that sounds like a big job, but you know what? Mises said in 1927, that's what the party of liberalism does. We're the only people who really represent the common good of all. Everybody else is representing some crazy agenda they want the state to do. So I think libertarians need to begin to identify themselves with just this one idea of a consistent application of liberty and stop. That doesn't mean you have to hate the right or hate the left, but you have to go into these political struggles aware that there are people out there that don't share your overarching vision, which is a society that runs itself. It's not complicated, but for some reason, people get buffeted around all the time. Absolutely. I hope to talk about some of this tonight.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
One more thing. So you're talking about the consistent application of liberty and the theory itself, and we're here at the Libertarian Party, which, from the beginning was a controversial concept. Are we going to work in electoral politics? 46 years later, we just heard Jeff Dice talking about the party hasn't moved past 1 point, some small percentage, and 40 years there was, basically the same numbers coming out. To me, I focus my energies on...
And so what was his point of saying that?
He was actually asking the audience to honestly reevaluate the outcomes and the return from their...
But here's the thing,
from their investment, basically saying, are you investing your time locally and for the presidential race, and has it progressed any? Has the movement
Well, I mean,
grown?
if Dice had showed up in the desert when the children of Israel were wandering around on the 39th year, but he would say, look at you people wandering around the desert. Where has that ever gotten you? You've been just going in circles waiting for what? Well, the fact is on the 40th year that they found the promised land. Sometimes it takes patience and it takes work. And I will not for one instant put down a single activist in the world of liberty since the party was founded, because these people had visions, they had hope, they did not despair, and they've been working very hard. We haven't seen the fruits yet, but the time could come, and it might be this year. We don't know. It's something we don't control. All we can do is do the right thing and be committed and be principled and have vision about the future and confidence that our cause will eventually triumph.
I definitely appreciate that sentiment. For me, and this is what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, is for those, because I agree with you. I'm not here to tell someone you're doing things the wrong way. You should do it the way I believe it's done.
Yeah.
To me, these people, especially here at the convention, it's a Saturday afternoon, and they're here right now trying to figure out some method. That's more than the people on the internet
nobody's
posting
getting
memes.
paid here, right? I mean, nobody's getting paid to be here. All these activists that have been dedicated to the Libertarian Party for all these years. What would we do if they hadn't done that? There would be no party. There would be no infrastructure. There'd be people have raised their children in these ideas. They've converted their neighbors. I mean, this is a much better way to grow than a big national presidential campaign like the Ron Paul movement was. And I love Ron, but that movement created a bubble of hysteria that exploded. And if you want to talk about something that didn't actually amount, that disappointed, let's talk about that. The Libertarian Party, we actually have something in place that, at least this coming November, that could be very interesting to see how things turn out. I mean, after all, the New York Times just last week covered the Libertarian Party in a very detailed story that's never happened in any election cycle, where the Libertarian Party has gotten this kind of serious national attention in April of an election year. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So things are happening. Things are moving. And I appreciate your point, too, that you're not prepared to criticize people. I mean, we all have different jobs to do, and some people enjoy this kind of party politics. It's not really my thing, but I appreciate the people who are dedicated to it. We all there's something special about all of us. We've all been called for some reason.
I agree.
With something.
My goal is what I hope tomorrow is to instill at least plant a seed of, if you're going to invest your time in the LP party, whether that's locally or nationally, I would, say focus locally, but also use some of that energy to start investing in counter-economic activity, start learning about the philosophy of Agorism.
I'm totally with you on that, and that is a
that's
contribution.
Where I believe that's going
Well, you've made wonderful contributions in a number of areas. That's one, and I believe, and I've written about that topic too. I mean, my article, 50 Ways to Leave Leviathan, I think it came out only like 2 years ago, but it had a huge impact, right? But another thing you're doing is very interesting, and trying to draw on the libertarian themes within all the major political, religious traditions. Finding the theme of human liberty alive, and a variety of mainstream and highly marginal religious traditions. That's important too. So, I think we need to find that libertarianism in all lines of thought that aspire for the best for humanity. So I think you've made a marvelous contribution in that respect. Yeah.